and this links back to the thing I talked about in context of trauma yesterday or the day before. But so yeah, so non-neutrality of language, for example, one of the things that we're told very often is that what humans do is they name things, that we're a naming species. And that's interesting, except for there's other languages, like for example, the Potawatomi language, which is around the Michigan, upstate New York kind of area, is very much verb based and not noun based. And so what that means is that rather than naming things, in that language, you talk about things doing things. And so there's way more of the doing than the thing in the language, which completely undermines this idea that humans are a naming species, because the naming languages are the Latin-based languages, the Germanic-based languages, and there's other languages in the country and world and that I'm not even familiar with. This is just one that I've recently found out about, that are verb based, that are not noun based. And so then even this notion that we start with a language that's neutral and then go forward. So we're a naming species, we're told, and then we go forward to understand our experience through this, this tendency for us to name. It's all there's nothing to that kind of way of thinking about kind of what we are. And so the reason why I bring this up, it has to do with this notion of where we are now and acceptance, and how that links into being grateful for what we have, because as we've seen over and over again, these things that we take for granted, which in my experience, for me, is many, many, many things, can be pulled away from me in an instant. And I won't even, and the vastness of what's possible in the context of that is becoming more and more available to me. I'm more and more aware of how many things I take for granted, probably most importantly. And so, but the sort of the way in which that becomes difficult really is linked to this notion of all these things that we have that we're supposed to have. And it's interesting, I go like this, and I'm actually, these are the things. These are so many things that I have. And so the loss of those things becomes, there's this pull for us to focus on the loss of those things in many ways because of the way we think about life and experience. There's I've heard a lot from indigenous folks where we as a culture, my culture, lives life looking in the rearview mirror, meaning that my whole life is about sort of a reflection back about and an evaluation in context of what's behind me as opposed to what's in front of me. Because regardless of what I lose over time, regardless of what's taken from me over time, if I'm looking in front of me, it doesn't matter. And I wrote this song called The Three-Legged Dog. And if you're interested in hearing it, you can Google my name, and it's all over the interwebs. But it's about this experience I had of this little dog. I was out busking, and this dog came running along, didn't even notice that it only had 3 legs. And then when I realized it had 3 legs, and it was as joyous and happy and having a great time. I don't know if it was joyous or happy. That's putting stuff on it. It seemed to be happy and not distracted by the lack of the legs. And so it becomes for me it's a tale about, what am I going to do now? Okay, so now I have 3 legs. Okay, so what am I going to do now, instead of, oh my God, it's so sad that I only have 3 legs. And I'm not suggesting that I'm moving away from some kind of recognition of what I've lost, but I'm talking about literally intentionally taking up this position of, where am I now and what's possible as a result of everything that's happened. And for me, it very much links to stuff in the program. The first step, the idea of acceptance. Acceptance is not compliance. Acceptance is not about going, everything's awesome, this is great. It's about acceptance. For me, acceptance is about where I am right now. Where am I right now? And what's possible in that context of where I am right now. Is, instead of being in the coulda, shoulda, woulda, is about what I didn't do. Coulda, shoulda, woulda is about what didn't happen, what could have happened, what should have happened. It's just about, here I am now, and where do I go from here? And meaning that it doesn't have to be great, but it is where I am. And so coming back to this is where I am right now. What am I going to do next? What's the next right thing for me? What's the next right thing? What's the next step that I can take? And so that for me creates this way more simple approach to living. It's not about all the possibilities and everything that could happen, just about where I am now and what's the next right thing for me to do. And so so linking all this stuff together about how the non-neutrality of language and the way that we take up these things that are supposed to be concrete. The idea that we as a human species are a naming species. No, and that all links to how we value what we value in the context of what we get focused on. This is not about values. That's a whole other concept. It's more about how we're invited to think about, we're invited to focus on what's behind us instead of where we are and what's in front of us. And so I'm taking a way more intentional position in relation to being where I am in the space that I am and thinking about what's possible as a result of what's happened. So anyway, that's what's next for Dr. Joel. This is what's next for Dr. Joel. But that's the show for today. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be doing Back to Basics Sunday. So tune in for that, little breathwork stuff and some stuff about in the moment practices. Talk to you.